Hello everyone and welcome to the first part of the baking chapter. This will be a really short one actually. It's going to be pretty quick and easy, and I'm really excited because this is going to be the first time we're actually going to be going into Marmoset and Substance Painter, and I think we're going to go into Photoshop later in this one as well. So before we sort of dive too deep into this, I changed a couple things and I just kind of wanted to bring those up before we go any further. So at the end of the last part, what I ended up doing was splitting everything into sort of two UV shells, or two UV maps. I kind of went through that and I changed it to 3. I did a few test bakes, and what I found out was that there just wasn't enough resolution. This mesh is just far too dense and there's too much going on. So I decided to split it up into 3. So if I go ahead and open up our UV editor, and let's just put this somewhere where we can see, we have all these inside pieces and the stacked pieces moved to the side. We have just the sort of the key area, very similar, some of them moved over, and then the frame. And this is what we're going to be focusing on today. So let me just close the UV editor. The other thing is that I sort of went through and organized our entire sidebar, and this is actually going to be one of the important parts for baking. I decided to do this off camera because it was just kind of like several hours of renaming things, and I don't think you guys would really want to watch that. But what I decided to do is each one of these layers has a corresponding group, and just to be clear, once again, Control G is to sort of make a group and put things into a group. So if I select frame low, which is this group, we can see all the different pieces inside of here, and they all have a different name. So cover is this part here, frame is the frame, so on and so on. We're going to have to go through and name everything for our bake to work properly. So as an example, let's use the frame here. We have frame underscore low. The underscore low tells us when we put it into the baker that this is the low poly version. So anything that we write underscore low is going to be important for knowing what is being baked onto. And then if we go to inside, or where is it, frame high, and we turn that guy on, let's go ahead. We have frame high, frame underscore high underscore 01 because there's multiple, and then the screws is frame high underscore 02. So there's going to be times where you have multiple meshes in the high poly assigned to just one low poly. All you have to do is do an underscore in the number, and I go through and do that for everything. So just make sure that the name is the exact same, and an easy way to do that is I would go through actually and name all of the low poly parts first, because it's just going to be underscore low. There's going to be no multiple versions of the same low poly. So let's go ahead and pretend that I just named frame underscore low. I can then go up here in the channel box layer editor, copy the name to make sure I'm getting exactly the right name, go to the high poly version and paste the name in there, and then change the underscore low to underscore high. Another thing that we did do at the very start of this whole tutorial is there it is. We installed this plugin here, and this plugin is actually really good for when you have some parts that have like a ton of high polys assigned to a single low poly. You can use this tool to, it's weird that it doesn't stretch out. You can rename it, and then it can have a suffix or prefix. You can change it to be numbered. It's really useful for naming a bunch of different things, so I'd kind of encourage you to play around with this one. But essentially, every piece, like this guy, plate low, has to be synced up with its kind of high poly counterpart. So then this is plate high underscore 01, plate high underscore 02. So with that out of the way, we should be good to go ahead and bake this guy now. So as long as everything is named correctly, let's go ahead and select all of our low polys. Just make sure it's all good. Can just freeze transform slate history one last time to be sure. And let's go ahead and do a file, export selection, and just sort of keep it all organized. I don't think I have any models yet, so I'm going to make a folder here, models, bake. I'm going to call this frame underscore low. The export name is very important as well, so frame underscore low, because it's a low poly of the frame. The first part doesn't matter, but as long as it has underscore low at the end, you're good. So we're just going to export that. And then we're going to do the same for the high, where I'm going to just go through and select all of this. Make sure it's all selected. File. Or I suppose I could freeze transforms, delete history. Just to double check that. And yep, file, export selection. And then just to make sure spelling is good, because sometimes you'll have spelling mistakes. Just change the low to high, and this is how it's going to know that these things are connected. So we're going to export that. It's going to take a minute. But the reason the naming is so important is because we're loading it through sort of an auto mesh loader, and it's going to automatically sort everything for us. If we were to sort this by hand, it would take ages. So we're not going to really worry about that. Renaming isn't too bad. It doesn't take too long. It just took quite a long time in this case because there's just, well, so many meshes. So we're going to be using toolbag for our bake. In my opinion, toolbag is like the single strongest baker. I used to use XNormal, I used to use Crazy Bump, I used to use Substance Painter. But yeah, none of those compare to toolbag, honestly. So if this is your first time using toolbag, it might seem like there's a lot going on here. It's really not too complicated. It's a very streamlined basic program. We're going to be hitting this little bread icon, which is conveniently the new baker icon. And for now, I'm just going to go over the things that we're going to be needing for baking. So let's go ahead and hit load under the quick loader. And we're also going to have auto reload checked on just in case we have any mistakes. If we export a mesh out of Maya over top of one of the names, it'll automatically reload it into our scene, which is pretty useful. So let's go ahead and go to our files. We can just select both of them and hit open. It'll take a second just to bring them all in, mostly the high poly because it's just so much geo going on. But toolbag's pretty good at handling this stuff. So, okay, it seems to be pretty good. Just so we can see our bake a little bit better, what I'm going to do is go to the Sky tab. This is going to be just the default lighting. And I'm going to go to presets for skylight. And there's one that I usually like to use when baking, and it is the museum one. I think it just makes it a bit clearer, easier to see what's going on. And we can change the ambient sky, the kind of colorful background, to just a solid color. I kind of wish it did this by default. I find myself always going to this. And just turning it down so we can really focus on this. Feel free to mess with the brightness a little bit. I'm not going to really do any serious lighting on this because we don't really need it. We're just going to be testing the bake and making sure the bake is good. And with that out of the way, we can go back to the baker. So right now what's going on is it's showing both our high poly and our low poly. So if we hit the H, it's going to get rid of our high poly. This is kind of like a toggle on and off. And the same with our low poly, of course, but we're not really looking to hide that right now. And as you can see in this kind of outliner here, we have the baker, and then all the children to the baker are the different parts we exported. So we have the cover, the feet, the frame. And say we open up one of these, we can see the low poly, frame low under low, and under high we have all the frame highs. So we have 10 parts for the frame. And like I said, it automatically loads this in, and whenever we say make a mistake and we go back into Maya and export, it'll automatically reload all of this in. So that's why naming conventions are pretty important, and they're going to end up saving you a lot of time in the long run. So how do we actually go ahead and bake this? Let's see. First of all, I'm going to delete the high material. We don't really need it. It brings in whatever materials you have from Maya or whatever program you're using. So I'm just assuming that this material has Lambert on it. But anyways, what we can do is make sure we just have normal checked on. We just want to be baking with our normals. This is kind of like our quality section here. I want to bake in 4K. Samples is going to be kind of how many bounces, I believe, or how many samples it's taking. Obviously, the name's pretty self-explanatory, and it's just going to ultimately raise your quality at the end of the day. If you just want to do a test bake, 4 or 1. But when you're doing your final bake, 64 is what you want to do. And some of these settings we might change. We're going to be revisiting smooth cage, and I'll explain that. But for now, let's just go ahead and bake. It's going to ask us for a output path. Models bake. I'm going to go back to, I'm going to make a new folder for baked textures. And I'm going to call this, actually I'm going to make a group for each of these guys. Call this one frame, and just call this frame. I think it by default makes it like underscore normal or whatever map you're baking, so I'm just going to call it frame, and it's going to save as a Photoshop document, which is really good. It's going to make it easier for us to edit later. I'm going to hit save, and it's going to go through and start baking for us. It shouldn't take too long. And it's done. Now, most of the time what happens is it automatically slots into the normal map spot for us, but I think since I brought in a different material and it wasn't using default, it didn't automatically do that. So we can just sort of click normal map. It's going to take us to our file directory, and so it's frame underscore normal, and we can put that on. So that's our baked normal map. Seems like everything's looking pretty good. We have some issues with the screws here. I'm going to address how we can fix that. This area turned out really solid, actually. It really gives the illusion that it's kind of like a nice rounded kind of opening, even though it's clearly cut through. This area turned out really nice, actually. Same with this area. These are obviously just a lack of information. There's just a hole there. Yeah, this turned out pretty spot on. We're getting some artifacting right there. Yeah, anything that's sort of like a tight interior like this, it doesn't surprise me too much. But other than that, it seems pretty good. One thing I was doing when I was testing is I was getting a lot more of these like artifacts, and I'm not exactly sure exactly what's going on here. So if I go to ignore transforms, it says mesh transforms such as rotation and position will be ignored for the purpose of this baking. I found that when I checked that on, it helped a little bit with it. So I'm going to go ahead and press that and hit bake. And since it's baking to the same location, it's going to automatically fill itself in on top of our currently input normal map. So that one doesn't seem like it's made too much of a difference. What we can do is click on this guy. We can click on low. And what this is currently showing us is kind of the cage, or the kind of bounding box of where we're baking within. It seems like there's a lot of issues because it's kind of this interior curve. It's kind of like cutting into itself, and that might be causing some problems. So we can actually change the max offset and bring it in quite a bit. And as you can see, that artifact is gone now. So we can go back to our baker. We can do an actual bake for that. And it seems like that's solved our baking issue on that guy. So that piece is now good. And it seems like there's no more artifacts anywhere that I can see. This area turned out, I was really worried about this point, but it turned out better than I expected. When I did my test bakes, this was really skewed down, but one thing I did to fix that is if you're finding some crazy stretching, adding in some extra geo can sometimes like average that out. So since this was like a very tall face and there was some extreme normals here and some extreme stuff down here, I just added this edge here, which is actually exactly where these two meshes sort of collide. And what it did was it did a really good job of kind of averaging everything out. That's kind of the only place I did it for, but I could see it being useful for some other models where you might have similar situations. So anyways, that worked out pretty well, but it's time to address the elephant in the room here. Kind of these screws all look pretty pretty sad and lopsided. Stuff like this looks a little bit weird. There's a few ways to deal with this. So the first and most common way, and the way that I'd recommend for most props you can get away with this and it looks really good, is you can just sort of go to, like, click the mesh, go to the folder for it, and click low, where it's sort of your low poly settings for this mesh. And we have an option called paint skew. And what this is going to do, and it's going to bring up all of our normals. And we can actually just sort of, as you can see, I'm painting and it's straightening them out. I can just paint directly on top of this and it's going to straighten those guys out. And now it's perfectly normal. No pun intended. So we can sort of go through all of that and just sort of hand paint it that way. But as you can see, there are like a ton of screws on this thing. And also it gets kind of imprecise when you're near the edges here. You don't want to sort of affect the corners. It might cause some issues. So let me see. I'm going to go in here. I can paint skew, clear. I want to clear all of that, set it back to normal. And just to be safe, maybe I don't need to bake again yet. I was noticing just a small issue here where we can see right there, there's a hard edge that I'm not liking too much. Kind of want to see what's going on. So yeah, this seems to be a hard edge. Could definitely be a soft edge. So I want to soften that out, see if the other side's the same. Hit G to do the same. And then we can go File. Sorry, no, we have to go to all of the low poly stuff. File, Export Selection, frame_low. And then when we open up toolbag, it'll automatically reload it. It'll look a bit funky because the normals aren't going to bake, or the baked normals aren't set for a smooth edge there. But yep, so it's back in. We can bake again and see if it gives us a better result. It's just a little bit too harsh. Like this one right here, I don't mind getting away with. Yeah, it's a bit of a harsher edge, but we're still getting that there. As for the other side seems to be good. Interesting. I'm going to take a look at the UVs on these guys then. If we go to our UV tool, and let's take a look at what we're dealing with here. So from here to here, this is still all the same shell. So it doesn't really make a ton of sense that it has that kind of issue. Is it just me or did it get better automatically? I think maybe it just took a second to reload the normal app in because that looks perfectly fine to me. Same with this side. Okay, well, I'll definitely take that. There's this area here, which might actually just be a different UV shell. No, it's just a hard edge. So this is the kind of stuff you want to look for when you see little nicks like this. This is a hard edge, so of course it's not going to bake properly. So I can go in here, soften it out. We can then grab all of our stuff, file, export selection, export it into frame low. It'll take a second to reload. And yeah, that's kind of the general workflow of fixing things. It'd be pretty helpful to sort of go through every single model and actually look for this kind of stuff. It also seems like this when I re-imported it, reset. So that's something to keep in mind. Interesting. I don't know what I just hit to freeze it, but okay. I'm just going to make sure there's no overlap there. Should be able to bake that again. And you can already see that that's fixed the majority of the issue. So let's bake that guy out again. And looking good. So the feet are looking good. They're all stacked and they're still turning out pretty solid. This area is looking really good. I was definitely concerned with it based on like the crazy mesh looking like that, obviously, but that actually looks really smooth and really natural. This stuff's all looking smooth and round. I definitely could have pushed the roundness on this a little bit more like these areas. And if you want to, you can even say change this to like roughness, turn the roughness all the way down and see how it looks when it's super shiny, or even change this to metal and look at it when it's metallic. And it's just like a lot of these areas that seem to be a concern, or I thought would be a concern, turned out really good. We're not seeing any weird seams anywhere. And because of so, I think we can kind of move forward with this. I'm going to turn the metalness off, add some roughness again. So anyways, back to the screws and how can we exactly go about fixing all of this stuff. So there's two types of normal maps that we can kind of bake out of this and merge them together. So I brought this up before, but we have smooth cage on right now. And what it's doing is it's kind of optimizing our mesh so we have the best sort of edges and everything looks smooth and working with the way we set up our normal maps and all that kind of stuff. So what we can do to sort of alter this to sort of fit our screws as good as possible is we can turn off smooth cage, and let's go ahead and bake. And as you can see, what it's done is it's changed the way that we're baking, so our normals are more shooting out straight and all of our screws look super good. Like all that's really natural. The problem, of course, though, is now all of our edges look pretty horrible. There's really no way around that with just this bake alone. So what we're going to have to do is bake out both versions and kind of merge them together. And in doing so, we're essentially going to be getting our perfect normal map. We're going to be using Photoshop to sort of help us out with this. But before we do that, we're not just making a normal map, right? We're also going to be making a ambient occlusion map, which is kind of like these shadows and crevices and everything. That's going to help us a lot with some of our texturing process later down the line. And we're also going to be using a material ID. The material ID is going to be super useful because I showed you guys at the very start in kind of the first part how we can mask out like all the bolts even though there's no geometry really quickly, because we can bake the area of all the bolts down to a color and say every time there's this solid color, add this material. So that's actually something we're gonna have to set up inside of Maya. So we're gonna have to first distinguish what every material is. So we're gonna have to close this out and open up our PureRef file just to make sure we know what our materials actually are and what we have to actually separate in this mesh. So It's been a while since we've had PRF like open in the middle of a video like this, so it's kind of exciting to get it back. It's just off on another screen here. But yeah, it's just going to tell us like what our kind of different materials are. So let's go back into Maya, and let's just start with some of the obvious stuff like this shiny black metal. So everything that material is, we're going to select right now. So it's all this stuff. Yeah, this stuff as well. It seems like the first part of the feet also fall under that category. Let's see. This back plate seems to be the same. So we're just gonna have to give it some kind of material. I'm gonna go ahead and use this guy. He's gonna be super useful for assigning material IDs. Let's go ahead and make these guys yellow. The next thing we can do is grab all the bolts in the scene, or all the screws rather. They're all gonna be the same color. So just sort of going through everything. Some on the bottom of the feet. There are some little guys tucked in here. Some up top. Up here, 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 here. And this is just so we can mask these all out and texture them all at the exact same time. There's no confusing bits about it. Just like that. Let's go ahead and make these guys red. Just like they were before, just to kind of keep it consistent. The feet kind of seem like they're more of a rubber. Like this very bottom part. I don't think there's too much of that, so I'm just gonna give them their blue. This is a part of that, so it's yellow, same material. This is kind of like a plastic, so I'm going to go ahead and give this its own color, green. And then all of this is baked down to the same spot, so I just need to make sure this is all different. They don't necessarily all have to be the same, but I'm just using it in certain areas to sort of break it apart, because this is all one mesh and I want to mask it out. So even though blue is used for rubber, I can use it here to sort of break things up a bit, and I'm going to use this kind of black as a different one. It's kind of like a silver. I think black will be a good color for that. All these parts kind of fall under that category. Give this blue as well. I think all we're missing is this, which could be our yellow. Oh, forgot some screws. And then this guy here, just something to change it. So I'm going to go with green. Just so that when we bake down this detail, we have a way to access this stuff really quickly. This guy, red. And then I don't think we're missing anything else. These guys here. It would probably be best to just go through every single one of these. But if we mess this up, we'll find out sooner or later. Okay, it seems like that is all of them. So what we can do is grab these guys, go to File, Export Selection, overwrite our high. And yeah, it'll probably take the same amount of time. I don't know if adding materials makes it take longer. We'll go back into here. This will probably take a little bit longer. Loading the high poly is kind of the most demanding thing for toolbag. So we'll just give that a moment. But now you can see all of our different colors have popped in here. And I'm just going to go ahead and save this since we haven't done that yet. Bake textures frame. Just call this whatever we want. Frame bake. It's probably a pretty good one. But yeah, what we can do now is go to our baker and we can do a material ID as well. And what this is going to do is take these solid colors and just bake them down to our low poly UVs and say like this screw is on this polygon at this spot on the low poly, even though it doesn't exist on the low poly. And it'll represent it as a solid color based on how we textured it inside of Maya. So let's go ahead and bake that material ID. Actually, no, there's a faster way to do this. So what I'm going to do is turn on normals, material ID, and then we're also going to bake our ambient occlusion. These are the only 3 maps we need out of toolbag. One important thing though, if we go into our settings for ambient occlusion, turn off ignored groups. Now, what this means is we have everything in groups here, and if we had ignore groups on, what it would mean is that, say, this piece here can receive cavity and sort of shadow information from this guy being on top of it. And we don't want that. We want all these to be separate so that we don't have any sort of weird bleeding. And we can take this guy apart without having shadows sort of like left on top of the mesh. We can sort of add in our own shadows and rust and targeted damage and stuff like that later in Substance Painter. We don't need to rely on the ambient occlusion to sort of do that for us. So ignore groups, we're going to turn that off. Have all this stuff set. Ray count, can probably turn that up to 700. This is just kind of like the quality of it. You don't have to go too crazy. It's already going to take forever. Like ambient occlusion bakes take a long time. And then what I'm going to do is smoothing cage is on. So this is going to be the version where the screws are all messed up. We can go and change our output. I'm going to call this frame underscore smooth. Save. And this is going to save all 3 of these maps to that location in a Photoshop file as the smooth version. And we're going to know it's the smooth version because the name is set up that way. So let's go ahead and bake that. It's going to send out those files. And yeah, baking this will probably take a little bit of time, so I'm going to go ahead and skip through this. Okay, so that should have baked out now. If we go to baked textures, frame, so we have the normal one that we did, and then we have smooth, smooth, smooth. This is the AO, the ambient occlusion, the material ID, and the normal map. So what we can do now is let's do frame underscore non-smooth. Not a very creative naming, but we can save it that way. We can turn off smooth cage, and we can go ahead and bake those guys out. Okay, so we should have all of our maps now, and we can head over to Photoshop to kind of combine these together. What I'm going to do first is just save this scene, just to make sure we're not losing any progress. And yeah, let's dive into Photoshop. So actually combining these is a pretty standard, straightforward technique. So it shouldn't take too much time, and then there's just one last little piece of the puzzle, and then the baking is going to be done. I think for this project, what I'm going to be doing is just showing you guys how to bake this part because it's the exact same information as the other parts. So I'll just do the other two on my own, and then we'll regroup when we're doing the texturing phase. So all in all, the baking portion of this is incredibly short. So let's start with our smooth. So I'm just dragging these in. So yep, this is what we're working with. It brings them all in as different Photoshop files, which is totally okay. I'm just going to drag them all into one, so I'm just going to get rid of the lock on it. Use this little mouse thing, bring it in. Control T is going to let us move this around, and I'm just going to plop it into place. And then do the same with our AO. So get rid of the lock. Move this into place, Control T to snap it in. And yeah, I'm gonna put the normal on top. We're gonna call this smooth normal, smooth AO, and smooth ID. And we're gonna put this into a group just by clicking the little folder down here. We can call this smooth. And then we don't really need these anymore. So then what we have to do is also get in the non-smooth versions, which will also take a second. So 1, 2, 3. Just sort of put them in the same order. Non-smooth underscore normal, non-smooth underscore AO, non-smooth underscore ID. We're also going to put these inside of a folder. And predictably, we're going to call it non-smooth. So I'm going to rearrange these where I'm going to put non-smooth underneath. So smooth is on top and non-smooth is underneath. And what we're going to be doing is, actually no, reverse that. We're going to want non-smooth on top. And how we're going to set this up is we're going to go to our non-smooth layer. We're going to add a mask. And sorry, it's been a while since I've used masks. I want to see if there's a way to just make it all black. Either way, we can just make that mask all black. And what we're going to do is just over the bolts and those kind of areas, we're going to be adding white to this mask. Anything on the mask that is white is going to appear, so it's going to show all of these different parts. And anything that is black is not going to show. So right now nothing is showing because the entire folder is a black mask. So we can go ahead and switch to white. White is going to be fully opaque. And we can sort of scan this model for any screws, and we can just sort of, using the brush tool, I might turn the hardness down. We can just sort of paint this in. And not only is it going to paint it in for the normal, it's going to paint in everything else. So if I turn off everything, so we're back to the ID, as you can see, it kind of shifts because it should be all lined up according to if it's smooth or not smooth. So since it's in a group and we're masking the group, it really only needs to be done once. So I'm just going to go ahead and scan this entire model. just starting up here. Going through everything. That's one thing, you don't want to go over the edges. The edges are done properly the way they are, so just really try and avoid those areas. Like, it's really easy to get up close to them now, so I'm just trying to be careful. And settle with something like that. So we're getting those smooth edges as well as the good screws. I'm getting some weird issues here where when I paint it out, like some imperfection pops up. But I guess that's pretty good. You're really never going to notice something that minor. So we've done this whole top part. Let's move down a little bit. Okay, no, we already did that. Can move here. These guys don't matter so much because they're actually completely covered. So I'm really not too worried about those. But it's still ideal to have it perfect and consistent all the way across. Just being very careful not to go over the edge there. This one's getting some pretty bad skews. Yeah, like I said, these ones don't matter because they're just straight up holes. In fact, this one I'm going to leave alone because there's actual geo on the other side of that hole. It's funny seeing how bad some of these get. Let's see, you can hit X to switch between black and white. This one's weird where it's not going to let me do it perfectly, so I'm actually going to make a new layer, put it above everything, and just actually paint it to fix it. And I'm going to call this normal fix. This is only going to be a problem for the normal map. I'm not worried about the other ones, and I'm making it capitalized so I remember it and I don't export it with everything else on. So continue to go through. These guys might be a little bit skewed. Yeah, we can definitely straighten that out quite a bit. There really isn't too much to comment on as far as this stuff goes. It really is just sort of like masking out more specific areas of the normal map. We definitely went a little over here. And this is another example of where I'm going to have to manually kind of fix this up. Turn my hardness kind of low. I'm just kind of airbrushing this sort of to fix it. And that should be pretty good. We already did that one. Let's focus on some more of this kind of stuff. These guys already look straight and they're too close to the edge, so I'm actually just going to straight up leave them the way they are. We got some crazy skews going on here. That one I think I'm going to leave because it's really messing with some stuff. This one looks kind of crazy either way. So I'm actually going to leave those. Did we already do these? Nope. And the cool thing is since this is in Photoshop, it's pretty easy to just go back and change all this if we ever need to. Super non-destructive. Pluses with the mask, which is also non-destructive. We can always change it from black to white, erase things. It's really easy to kind of fix any potential issues we might have. Okay, that's pretty straight. It is definitely hard to tell what I have and haven't done though. Okay, I think we're confidently able to kind of move down a little bit. Nothing here. This is the part of the back where it's a really deep screw. So that was definitely going to cause some issues sooner or later. Okay. We missed this one. It's pretty faint. Whoa. Okay, we're going to have to fix that by switching back to black. It's a very fine line here, geez. There we go. right? We already did that. Guess we're going down here now. Yeah, this is some of the crazy UVs caused by how skewed I set up the UVs for the actual main shell of this thing. You can see even the straightened versions are pretty warped. This is the bottom of the foot. Should be pretty straight as it is. Some areas like this, which are pretty... Yeah, if it's too close to the edge, I'm just going to kind of let it be the way that it is. I don't want to risk ruining the smoothness of the edge, but something like this is a little bit easier to work with for sure. I'm going to go into this extra layer that we have set up. Just hand paint that out. Okay, that's already straight. It's using the wrong color. Let me go back and check that. Okay, that's a bit better. This is another spot where I don't think I can really do too much to fix it. Okay. Yeah, there just is not too much I can really add to this at the moment. Yeah, that's just a little dip, so I'm going to leave that be where it is. This one might also be a bit tricky to work with. Yeah, I'm going to leave that. So now we're onto this sort of big main shell. Should be easier to tell what's going on here. Okay. Just a few more on this guy, and we're getting near the bottom. Yeah, we definitely have missed some more important stuff in the middle. Let's kind of work from the bottom up this time. I think this is the inside of this kind of cover part. This is the tab on the inside of the actual frame. Yeah, I think that's what these lines are. It's more the interior, so it's picking up some residual information. This is interesting. So this part here is this plate. All things considered, the screws don't look that bad, but it seems like when I soften it out, this is a lot closer to one edge than this. And it's even if I do it this way. Like this screw's perfectly fine. It's literally just this screw. That's the issue. So I might actually just opt to leave this screw and just do this one. You kind of have to put a little bit of thought into this as well. You can't just blindly do it. Okay. It would be a lot nicer if there was like a actual like way to check off what you're doing here. I think I did all these guys already. Okay, I guess we're moving to the bottom. Okay. My Photoshop's definitely lagging quite a bit now. But I guess it does have 6 4K maps in here, so that's kind of normal. Right, we have this guy down here. Yeah, and this is the guy that's going to give us some sass. Yeah, in this case, I'm just going to use the normal fix layer and just paint it out. It's just a little bit too tight. It's being kind of tricky. So going back to the mask, let's see if there's other areas we can work on. This already looks fine the way it is. Yeah, definitely this guy could use some love. This one's pretty solid to begin with, but correcting it isn't going to harm anything. This is too small, I'm not going to work on that. These are interiors, so the likelihood of anyone seeing this is pretty low. And I think that's it. Now, there's one thing I do want to check out before moving on. So yeah, we're getting some of these lines, like that's what the baking issues are coming from. And if I had to guess, it would probably be because, yep, this is sort of cutting through to the other side. So I'm going to shrink it, and we're going to rebake this one. And the good thing about having a Photoshop file in groups, and we're using masks like this and masking groups, is we can just swap this out, and it's going to fix that area for us. So I'm going to start by saving as, and we're going to call this final bake frame underscore final bakes. So we can save that. We can then go back to toolbag. It was the smooth one that was giving us issues. We can go to our baker, smooth cages on. We want normals, material ID, and ambient occlusion. We're just going to be redoing all of them. And let's just make sure we're saving on top of the right files. So go to our output. And this was frame smooth. Frame underscore smooth. So then since it's the same name, it's going to save over all these guys. We can hit save. Just make sure smooth cage is on. These guys are all checked. Everything's the way it should be. And we can hit bake. Okay, so this new bake did the trick. We're not getting those issues anymore. We can go back into Photoshop. For the smooth category, we can go ahead and delete all of these. Go back and grab frame smooth for all of these, slap them back in. So 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, and we're just gonna put those back in the smooth group. Sort of rearrange them to be the order that we intended. And sorry, now if I can try and find where some of those were. Yeah, we're not getting any of those weird artifacty errors on those anymore, so that's super good. If I'm not mistaken, we did finish everything off. Yeah, I think that was everything, and we can always go back here and fix it if it wasn't. So what we can do now is yeah, we can save this out as its final versions essentially. So we kind of have that master file that we saved not too long ago that has all this information, and now we're going to be saving them as Photoshop files, kind of showing off exactly what we want to be showing off, and we're going to name them accordingly to what map it's going to be, which in this case is going to be the normal, the AO, and the ID map. So it's going to take a while to save this. Oh, I did save for web, that's probably why. So let's just let this save. This is going to be if you just wanted to save it out as a like a PNG or a JPEG or something like that, which obviously is super useful, but we're not going to be going for that in this case. So yeah, let's just wait for this to load out, I guess. This is not what I was going for. Okay, just cancel that. So I'm going to do File, Save As, and the way that this is presented right now is our final normal map, right? We have our mask on, we have just the normal map showing. Yeah, this is good. Actually, what I'm going to do is, just to be super safe, just have only normal maps in the normal fix showing. File, Save As, I'm going to call this frame. final normals. Hit save. We can then just show ambient occlusion and just check that, yeah, this is all straight like we've intended it to be. Go to File, Save for Web, or no, Save As, Frame, Final, AO, Save, and then last but not least, just the ID. Interesting, it's slightly off. That could definitely be an issue. Hit Control T and just kind of snap that over. And I want to see if that leaves a gap on the other side. Okay, there's no gap there. And now there's no gap there. This one also had a gap, so let's just move that over. Strange, I guess when I put it into place it wasn't perfectly lined up. Just checking the corners, but now it should be good. So I should be able to just go to File, Save for Web. No, not Save for Web. File, Save As. Final ID, Save. Okay. See, that makes me curious now about the normals. Okay, everything's off, which is a problem. Very important that everything's as lined up as it can possibly be. And I'm assuming this is off as well then, so I'm going to select both of these, hit Control T, put that into place. So now we can do File, Save As. This is our final normals. So we're saving over that. And then we're going to have to fix our AO. Because everything's off by just a little bit. It's weird how it's all off by the same little bit. Some kind of import issue. Probably on my end. Okay, that's all lined up. File, Save As. Frame Final AO. Save. Okay, okay. And that should be that. It's all saved, so we can close it without worrying about losing anything. Same with this. Just save it. And I wanted to sort of test things out in Substance Painter before I say that this is done. And the more I think about it, the more I think there will be another part to this baking section. There's another thing I need to show off to you guys, but as long as this works, I think that's going to call it for this part. Let's just see how it looks in Painter. My Painter takes a lot of time to load up because I have a lot of custom materials and smart materials and masks and all of that, so I will cut the video here actually and see you guys once it's all loaded in, and we can test if everything's working. So I'll catch you guys in just a moment. Okay, so we're inside of Painter. We have everything loaded up. We can go to File, New, and this is just a test. We're not really doing anything with this right now. I just want to make sure everything's working properly. So I guess it was still loading actually, because it's being a little bit sassy. One of the things I have to do is clear out a lot of these old materials that I don't really use too much. But for File, this is going to be our mesh, so we can select. We're wherever we saved our stuff. So this is going to be models, bake, and just frame low. We want our normal format to be OpenGL. This is because this is kind of how we baked things out inside of toolbag. What essentially this means is normal GL and DirectX are the same thing pretty much, except for the Y channel, our normal map channel. The Y map in our normal map channel is inverted depending on which one it is, and some things render with OpenGL and some things render with DirectX. We just happen to go through with OpenGL, so there's always the option to change this in game engines or even in Marmoset or wherever you're rendering, but just the way we've set it up is OpenGL, and then we can go through and add our baked maps here, wherever I put them, baked textures, frame, and we have frame final, final, final. We can open those all up, and we did it in 4K, so let's hit OK. It's going to take a second to load. Just got to bring in everything. Yeah, I swear, once I have everything loaded in, it's really not that slow. It's just my Substance Painter just sort of booting everything up here. All this sort of custom stuff takes too long. So I've kind of caused my own problems here. Yeah, we definitely have some strange normal stuff going on here, but let's see if when we add in our maps, if it makes a difference. So project is going to be all the stuff you import, and we can go and find the normals and drag that into normal map. And it's still loading, so it might take a second to update. So let's see how that turns out. Interesting. So the screws are looking good. We're getting the round edges. Everything's looking fine. This stuff's all good. This, though, is definitely a problem, which is strange because everything else is fine. We can even plug in our AO, which will probably take a second, but this is going to give us some more shadow detail on things. Yeah, some more shadow details there. In the back, a lot of this stuff is looking pretty good. These areas are looking really crispy. This is looking really nice. So it's mostly just this front plate, and if I had to guess, it has to do with how Substance Painter is rendering things. If I go to the rendering array, this is like a built-in, more realistic renderer. I'm curious to see if the same issue is going on, because Maya didn't have an issue with it, and toolbag didn't have an issue with it. Very strange. Let's get out of that. See if we can change any of our settings. It doesn't seem like it, but either way, I'll do some looking into this. I'm assuming it's probably because there's just so many triangles going on here. It's very thin and skewed and causing some surface details to be kind of warped out of proportion. That being said, the entire normal map is fine everywhere else. We got it working perfectly fine for us inside of what am I trying to say? Toolbag. I'm going to see if I import it into here if there's an issue. Actually, no, there shouldn't be an issue because it's rendering perfectly fine here. So it seems like it's a Substance Painter issue. I'm going to look into this. I'm actually going to call it here for this part. We finished our normal map. I'll have another part for baking. It's going to be a very short chapter. Another part because there's one thing I need to show you guys how to do exclusively for the keys, and it's going to require its own part. But then now I also want to go over how I fixed this. This is very strange. I've never seen this before, where there's a rendering issue that's exclusively just in Substance Painter. On the bright side though, everything else seems to be fine. So yeah, I'll do some digging and figure out exactly what's going on, but that should do it for this part. Hopefully that explained a lot more as to how we can take sort of two bakes and merge them together into one and make it look really good and crisp, and just kind of a clean, smooth workflow for all of that. I guess we covered a lot. We set up our naming conventions, we went over groups, we went over baking and shells and painting SKUs and the Photoshop treatment. So even though we're ending on kind of a sour note, I still think it was kind of a pretty diverse and good part of the chapter. But like I said, I'll look this over, I'll figure it out for the next part. And yeah, anyways, thank you guys for watching. Hopefully you enjoyed, and I'll see you in the second and final part of the baking chapter. All right, see you guys.